So I'm going to use the same process. And I'm going to try here to cut in the nails before I mask anything out, but it's not going to work that well. So I decide to go ahead and do the mask, maintain the workflow, clean up the mask to get the proper cut. And sometimes it can get tricky to get the right shape. That being said, once you do have the shape, easy enough to unmask and then add in some clay and then smooth it out. And I don't recommend doing the cut right here. I recommend doing it after the mask. So you remove the mask and then do the cut, but this can also work. I'm also pulling it out a little bit. And that'll give me the right shape. And here I'm just adding some irregularity to it. This kind of a thing usually helps the model look a little bit more realistic. It's minor stuff, and most people don't focus on the hands. And it just depends on what kind of a scene you're building, really. But for example, in games, characters' hands, unless it's a first-person shooter or something like that, it's really, really difficult to see a lot of detail in the hands. That's one of those parts where they save the polygons when possible. As you can see here, I'm just looking at my hand and seeing how many of these little cuts I have above my knuckle, and I'm just adding them in there. And here you saw that without a mask, I was able to sort of make a nail show up. So, I'm showing you that there is no one way of doing something. Although I do like the masking method. I think it is the most useful one, the most, and one that'll give you the most reliable results, really. But doing it by hand will sort of allow your nails to have a bit of imperfection, because like it or not, the mask is a geometric shape if you just use the brush to do it. So when you cut it in, it's almost as if your nail is chipped off somewhere. And it's a cool little look. Also allows me to do the cuticles a little bit more specifically, the way that I want them. In any case, in this lesson we're just going to be covering a lot of the detailing process once you've established the base, really. It's really easy to fall into the mistake of over detailing early on. So long as you respect the blocking in phase, the structural phase, you'll have a lot easier time when detailing. So I noticed that my knuckles need to be a little higher here, and that's why I'm editing everything to reflect that. And obviously we have to do the thumb. And the thumb is the biggest nail you've got, really. So you should give it a lot of attention. But as you can see, nothing new here. Clay buildup, Damien standard, and then you've got a nail. Hopefully you guys can follow along. It's going fairly slow, and this is real time, so you're not missing out on anything. I would also say that if you're going to pose your hand, you should do it before you uh, do any major sculpting, because whenever you pose your hand, things get really different underneath and on top, so you need to sort of account for that. And here I'm just adding a little bit of texture to the nails, just so you can see what it would look like if it would be an elderly or monster hand, something like that. And now, I'm just looking at the overall shapes here and seeing what needs refinement. So I'm definitely gonna make sure that this thumb is a little bit thicker now. It needs to have that indentation of the format of the metacarpal. Because when I mentioned in the first lesson that the most important thing was separating the bones from the fleshy bits, you also need to make sure that it looks like they're bone on the flesh is conforming to the bones, because that is effectively what it's doing. And now I'm going to start detailing the knuckles. As you see me pausing there, it's just because I'm looking at my hand to see what I have. I've done a lot of manual work, so my hands are a little bit bruised and scarred on a few parts. So for me, I have a lot more marks than you would normally see on the knuckle area. And it's time to move underneath and see what we can do from there. As you can see, just by using the standard brush, you can get a lot of interesting results. Skin folds, just extra detail. And whenever you pose your hand, like I said before, the inside will be greatly, greatly different. So if you want to sculpt your hand in a pose, or if you want a hand in a pose, then you should take pictures of your hand in that pose so you can see what you should sculpt. There's no point in going in blind. That'll just give you, more issues down the line. So always, you know, try your best to have reference for whatever it is that you're doing. If you're going to do a full body male or female or something like that, if you have friends, family that can help you stay in those poses or do something specific for you, it's 5 minutes of their day, and it'll really help you out in the end of the sculpting process. So this lesson is going to be a little bit long since it is the final one before we wrap up the hands. I skipped the part where I add the pores and all the high frequency detail, because there are plenty of videos here to show you how to use the alphas. Even I have some to show you that. but I did want to show you the secondary shapes that I like to add when sculpting hands and things like that. Now, obviously, I'd spend a lot more time on this, but as a good base, as a solid sculpting, starting point, this is pretty good. And so long as you remember that you have to keep working on this, then you should be fine. Just don't call it final. And I'll make the suggestion that I made on my zombie dog tutorial again. You should always try to sculpt a little bit, take a day, and then look at it again and continue sculpting, because that one day will let you just get a fresh pair of eyes. And on something like hands, you could immediately notice that the fingers is too small, or something's off that you didn't notice before, and it's really useful to be able to do that. In any case, I'm just going over everything that I've already detailed, and I'm adding some clay on top of it. And that'll give it some contrast, make it look good. And that's going to do it for the hand, guys. I hope you enjoyed. And let's go ahead and in the next lesson,